They chained a human girl to a wedding she never chose, thinking the vampire king would break her first. Then he looked into her eyes, and for the first time in centuries, he went still. Talia Quinn spent her mornings boxing beignets in her aunt's little New Orleans bakery while the Uber Eats tablet kept chiming, and her white cat, Ivory, sat by the register like she paid rent. Talia smiled for customers, but her hands were always tense. Every dollar she made disappeared into hospital bills, overdue rent, and the debt her stepfather had hidden until dangerous men started showing up at the door. She had sworn her two younger brothers would never be traded for anyone's mistake. Across the river, in a mansion older than most family names in Louisiana, vampire king Caius Thorne listened to a kneeling trader cry for mercy. His white hair fell over a black coat as he gave the man a cold, almost amused smile. "Your grandfather betrayed my brother in 1887, Caius said lightly. "I do admire a family tradition. Shame I'm ending it." Then the royal seal arrived. Talia broke hers with shaking fingers. Caius opened his without blinking. Both letters carried the same sentence: "The marriage will take place at midnight." Talia had 4 hours to say goodbye to her brothers. She held them tight in their cramped apartment, memorizing the way they smelled like the cinnamon rolls she'd made that morning. "We'll be okay," her younger brother whispered, trying to be brave at 14. She wanted to believe him. Ivory wound between her legs, unusually agitated, as if the cat knew something terrible was coming. When the black car arrived at 11:30, Talia didn't look back. She couldn't. The cathedral loomed ahead, all Gothic spires and shadowed windows, looking less like a place for weddings and more like a tomb. Her tomb, maybe. She stepped inside, and the doors slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed through her bones. If this opening already has its teeth in you, don't watch in silence and leave me hanging. Subscribe and join our Vampire Love Stories community. Then tell me in the comments what city you're watching from so I know where the night is reaching you. Quick question. Would you run from the monster or make him fear you? The cathedral smelled like dead roses and old blood. Talia stood at the altar in a borrowed dress, her brothers held as collateral somewhere in the shadows. When Caius entered, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. He moved like death itself, guards scrambling back, one vampire actually whimpering. He stopped 3 feet from her, tilting his head. "The council thinks binding me to a human will make me manageable. How unfortunate for you." Talia lifted her chin. "Get it over with." He reached for her hand to complete the blood bond. The instant their skin touched, Caius jerked back like he'd been burned. His eyes went wide, genuinely startled. For a heartbeat, raw terror flickered across his face. "What are you?" he whispered. She had no answer. She was just Talia. But the most feared creature in 5 states had just flinched from her touch. The officiant stammered something about proceeding with the ceremony, but neither of them moved. Talia stared at her own hand, the one that had made an 800-year-old vampire king recoil in genuine fear. There was no tingle, no warmth, nothing that felt different, just her ordinary human hand that had boxed beignets that morning. Caius remained frozen 3 feet away, his breathing uneven, something she instinctively knew vampires didn't need to do. He was rattled, truly rattled, and in that rattling she saw the first crack in his armor. Whatever she was, whatever lived in her blood, it had just shifted the entire balance of power in this cathedral. The hunter had become the hunted, and both of them knew it. The question was, what would he do about it? Caius circled her like a predator trying to understand why prey didn't run. His hand stayed carefully behind his back. "The bond requires blood," the officiant stammered. "I'm aware," Caius snapped, but didn't move closer. Talia's patience cracked. "My brothers are waiting. Either kill me or marry me, but stop wasting my time." Several vampires gasped. Nobody spoke to their king that way and kept their tongue. Caius laughed, sharp and bitter. "You have no idea what you just bound yourself to, do you? The things I've done would make your nightmares look like bedtime stories. I worked 14-hour shifts to keep my family alive. You think I care about your villain origin story?" He moved so fast she didn't see it, suddenly inches from her face. "I killed my own mother for betraying me." Talia didn't blink. "Mine sold me to pay her boyfriend's gambling debt. We all have problems." Something shifted in his expression. Curiosity, maybe. Or hunger. "Fine," he said softly. "Let's see how long you last." The officiant rushed through the rest of the ceremony, nobody daring to touch the blood bond ritual after what they'd witnessed. Words were spoken, vows neither of them meant, and suddenly they were bound by law, if not by blood. Caius signed the documents with a flourish that seemed almost mocking, but his hand shook slightly. Talia noticed. As they exited the cathedral into the New Orleans night, a sleek black car waited. He opened the door for her with exaggerated courtesy, playing the part of the gentleman when they both knew he was anything but. "After you, wife," he said, the word dripping with dark amusement. She slid into the leather seat, Ivory already somehow inside and settled. The Vampire King, who'd promised to see how long she'd last, was about to discover she'd been surviving impossible situations her entire life. The blood bond demanded proximity for 7 nights, or both would die. Caius brought her to his estate, watching from across the room like she might explode. Ivory, who Talia refused to leave behind, immediately claimed his ancient leather chair. "Your creature is shedding on a throne older than America," Caius noted dryly. "Good, something here should be comfortable." He poured bourbon, keeping the table between them. "The servants prepared the east wing for you. Where do you sleep?" "I don't." Talia noticed how he held the glass without drinking, how his fingers drummed patterns when she moved closer. The most brutal king in vampire history was nervous. "What happens when you touch me?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "I feel human." The confession hung between them like a blade. "Is that so terrible?" He set down the glass hard enough to crack it. "The last time I felt human, I still had a heartbeat and hope. Both were beaten out of me centuries ago." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. Talia watched him standing there in his own mansion, surrounded by centuries of accumulated wealth and power, yet looking utterly lost about what to do with one human woman and her cat. "The bond," she finally said. "What happens if we don't stay close?" His jaw tightened. "We both die, slowly, painfully. The council made sure of that. So we're prisoners to each other. For 7 nights. Then the bond solidifies and distance won't kill us, just weaken us." He said it like the weakness was worse than death. Talia stood, smoothing down her borrowed dress. "Then I suggest we figure out how to survive each other, because I'm not dying for their politics." She walked toward the east wing, feeling his eyes track every step. Neither of them slept that first night, both hyper-aware of the other's presence in the too-quiet mansion. Talia found him in the library at 3 a.m., surrounded by ancient texts. Ivory had curled in his lap, and he seemed too distracted to notice. "Looking for answers about me?" she asked. "Your bloodline," he corrected, not looking up. "There were rumors centuries ago, humans who could strip vampires of their power through touch alone. We hunted them to extinction." "Apparently not." He finally met her eyes. "My father turned me against my will, said love made men weak, so he ensured I'd never feel it again. For 800 years I felt nothing, then you touched me." Talia sat across from him. "What did you feel?" "Everything I'd forgotten. Warmth, fear, the weight of every life I've taken." His voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what it's like to suddenly feel 8 centuries of grief at once?" She reached for his hand. He pulled back. "Don't. You need this." "I need nothing," he snarled, but his eyes betrayed him. They were desperate, human. The confession hung in the air between them like smoke, choking and real. Talia sat back, processing the weight of 800 years of forced numbness suddenly shattered by her simple touch. No wonder he'd looked terrified. She hadn't just threatened his power, she'd ripped open wounds he'd spent lifetimes learning to ignore. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "Neither did I," he replied, but his voice had lost its edge. "Yet here we are." He closed the ancient book with careful reverence, dust motes dancing in the lamplight. "You should rest, dawn is coming. Vampires can feel the sun? No, but you can, and despite what you might think, I don't want you exhausted." It was the closest thing to kindness he'd offered. Talia left him there among his books and his grief, but when she reached the doorway, she paused. "Caius, thank you for telling me the truth." She didn't wait for his response, but she heard his sharp intake of breath, surprised by gratitude he didn't think he deserved. The fourth night, Talia found him teaching Ivory to play chess. The cat kept knocking pieces over, and Caius was explaining strategy like she understood. "She's winning," he said without looking up. "She's cheating. All the best players do." He moved a pawn. "Your brothers are safe. I had them relocated to a penthouse in Baton Rouge, full scholarship to Tulane, both of them." Talia's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you didn't ask me to." He scratched behind Ivory's ears. "Everyone always wants something from the monster. You just wanted to survive." She sat beside him, closer than before. This time, when their shoulders brushed, he didn't pull away. He shuddered, but stayed. "Tell me something good from before." His eyes went distant. "My sister used to braid flowers in my hair, said white hair was meant for decorating." A ghost of smile touched his lips. "I'd wear them to court, and anyone who laughed would answer to her." "What happened to her?" "I happened." The smile died. "The monster my father created killed everyone the boy had loved." Talia took his hand. This time he let her. They sat there in the library, hands intertwined, neither speaking. Caius's palm was cool against hers, but she could feel the slight tremor running through him, the overwhelming sensation of touch after centuries of numbness. Ivory had fallen asleep on the chessboard, one paw resting on the white king piece. "This is terrifying," he admitted, so quietly she almost missed it. Feeling again, caring again, knowing it can all be taken away. Talia squeezed his hand. "That's what makes it worth having." They stayed like that until the first rays of sunlight crept through the windows, and for the first time in 800 years, Caius watched a sunrise reflected in another person's eyes and felt something other than emptiness. He was falling for her, he realized, with growing dread and wonder. The monster was learning what it meant to be human again, and it was the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to him. Everything shattered when his enemies came for her. They knew what she was now, what she could do to him. 30 vampires surrounded the estate while Caius was hunting. They wanted the weapon that could destroy their king. Talia stood in the foyer, Ivory hissing at her feet. The leader stepped forward. "Come quietly, or we burn everything." "Caius will kill you all." "Not if you've already stripped his power. One touch, you make him mortal, then we take his throne." The front door exploded on its hinges. Caius stood there, blood dripping from his mouth, eyes pure murder. But when he saw them surrounding her, something cracked in his expression. "Let her go," he said, too quietly.
"The great king begs? Love has made you weak, just like your father predicted."
Caius looked at Talia. "Run." Instead, she walked straight to him, past every threat, and placed her hand on his chest. His power didn't fade, it amplified, roaring through him like wildfire. "You assume I make him weak, but I make him remember what he's protecting." The massacre that followed became legend, but worse was coming. In saving her, Caius had broken an ancient law. The Vampire Council demanded her death. The aftermath was painted in ash and blood. Bodies of his enemies dissolved into nothing, leaving only scorch marks on the marble floors. The council's messenger arrived before the last one had fully disintegrated, an ancient vampire in ceremonial robes who looked at the carnage with cold disapproval. "Caius Thorne, you have violated the Accords of 1523. No vampire may use amplified power to slaughter council-sanctioned executioners." His eyes landed on Talia. "The human dies, or you both do." The messenger vanished before Caius could respond, leaving behind a sealed scroll. Caius picked it up with trembling hands, his white hair still wild from the battle, blood still on his coat. He read it once, then again, before his eyes found Talia's. The look on his face told her everything. They'd won the battle, but the war had just begun, and this time, the entire Vampire Council wanted her dead. The council gave them until dawn. Surrender Talia or face execution together. Caius paced his study like a caged animal while she sat calmly, Ivory purring in her lap. "I won't let them touch you," he growled. "You can't fight the entire council. Watch me." She stood, walking to him slowly. there's another way. If you denounce our bond publicly, claim I enchanted you, they'll let you live." His eyes went wild. "You're asking me to betray you? I'm asking you to survive." He grabbed her shoulders, desperate. "I have survived. 8 centuries of empty survival. You're the first real thing I've felt since my heart stopped beating." Talia pulled away. "Then you're a fool." The words hit harder than any blade. Caius stepped back, and in his panic to fix it, he made the mistake that would haunt him forever. He grabbed an ancient dagger from his desk. "Then I'll make you immortal. Turn you tonight. They can't execute what they can't kill." He cut his wrist before she could stop him, pressing the bloody wound toward her mouth. "Drink." Talia slapped him so hard his head snapped sideways. The betrayal in her eyes was devastating. "You think taking my humanity without consent makes you different from the stepfather who sold me? From everyone who's tried to control me?" Caius dropped to his knees, the weight of what he'd tried crushing him. "Talia, please, I was trying to save—" "You were trying to own." Her voice was ice, just like everyone else. She walked to the door. He crawled after her, actually crawled, the king who'd never begged for anything. "Please don't leave. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll face the council. I'll die. Just don't leave thinking I'm like them." She paused at the threshold. "You're worse. They never made me believe they were different." Talia walked down the corridor, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the mansion. Behind her, she could hear Caius still on his knees, broken in a way that no enemy had ever managed. Part of her wanted to turn back, to tell him she understood he'd been desperate, but a larger part, the part that had survived being sold like property, knew that forgiveness without consequence taught nothing. He needed to feel this, to understand the gravity of trying to steal her choice, her humanity, even with love as his excuse. Ivory trotted beside her, tail twitching with agitation. "I know," Talia whispered to the cat, "but some lessons have to hurt." She'd made it to the front door when she heard it, a sound she'd never expected to hear from the throat of an immortal king. Caius was weeping, truly weeping, the kind of soul-deep sobs that came from someone breaking apart and rearranging into something new. The white cat's urgency was unmistakable, darting ahead and then circling back to make sure Talia followed. Her heart pounded as she ran those 3 blocks back, fear and anger and something she didn't want to name warring in her chest. What was he doing? What stupid, noble, utterly Caius thing was he about to do? When she rounded the corner and saw the courtyard filled with vampires, saw him standing there alone and unafraid in the center of a death trap, her breath caught. This wasn't just an apology. This was him offering his life as penance, putting her in a position of absolute power over him, the same power he'd tried to take from her. She wanted to scream at him for the manipulation of it, but watching him kneel, watching him bare his throat to an hour of mortality surrounded by enemies, she understood. This wasn't manipulation. This was surrender, complete and terrifying and real. Caius stood before the entire vampire council in his own courtyard, unarmed and undefended. Every enemy he'd ever made circled like sharks. "I invoke the ancient right, trial by humanity." The council leader sneered. "You'd surrender your immortality for judgment?" "Temporarily, yes." He looked straight at Talia. "For 1 hour, strip me of everything. Make me mortal, vulnerable. Then let her decide if I deserve to walk away." Talia's breath caught. It was a death sentence. His enemies would tear him apart the second he was powerless. "Caius, don't!" "You were right." His voice carried across the courtyard. "I tried to steal your choice because I was terrified of losing you, just like my father stole mine. I became exactly what I hated." He knelt, that same devastating position from before. "So now I give you all the power. Decide what I deserve." She walked to him slowly, the council watching. When she touched his face, he didn't flinch. The power drained from him instantly. His skin warmed, his heart started beating. Human, fragile. 3 vampires lunged immediately. Ivory moved like white lightning, her eyes flashing with something ancient and protective. She grew, not in size, but in presence, and the attackers froze mid-strike, suddenly terrified of a house cat. Talia realized then that Ivory had never been ordinary. She'd been guarding Talia her whole life. Talia stepped between Caius and his enemies. "He's under my protection now." The council leader laughed. "You're human. You have no authority here." "She has mine," came a voice from the shadows. Then another, then 12 more. Vampires Caius had spared over centuries, debts he'd never collected, mercy he'd shown and forgotten. They formed a wall around him. He could have slaughtered us all tonight. Instead, he chose to be vulnerable. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength your violence will never understand. The council had no response. By their own laws, the trial was valid. Caius had survived his hour of mortality. Talia touched his chest again. His power flooded back, but something was different now. He gasped, tears streaming down his face as centuries of frozen emotion finally thawed completely. "I feel it," he whispered. "All of it. The grief, the guilt, the hope." He looked at her with wonder. The love. Caius exhaled, like someone remembering how to breathe for the first time. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch different now, not possessive, not controlling, reverent. Like he was holding something sacred he'd spent 8 centuries searching for and never believed he'd find. Around them, the courtyard felt suddenly quiet, the threat no longer pressing quite so close. The vampires who had come to his aid stood guard with solemn loyalty, and Ivory pressed against Talia's leg as if sealing the vow. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice raw and broken and honest in a way the monster never could have been. Talia placed her hands over his. "No, you don't, but I'm choosing you anyway." She kissed him then, softly, in front of every enemy who'd come to watch him die, and instead witnessed the Vampire King being reborn. The council said nothing. There was nothing left to say. 3 months later, Talia expanded her bakery with a very silent investor. Caius showed up every morning at 6, Ivory riding his shoulder, pretending he was just there for the coffee. The wedding they chose for themselves happened on a Tuesday, witnessed only by her brothers and the vampires who'd become strange, protective family. When she told him about the baby, twins the doctor said, he cried again. Still not used to feelings, but learning. "What if I'm a terrible father?" he asked, hand on her stomach. "Then you'll be terrible together with me." She kissed him softly. That's what love is, choosing each other every single day, not taking the choice away. He pulled her close, and for the first time in 800 years, the monster everyone feared finally felt like he'd come home. 5 years later, Talia watched from the bakery window as Caius taught their twins, Dante and Luna, how to feed the pigeons in Jackson Square. His white hair caught the New Orleans sunlight, while 4-year-old Dante tried to mimic his father's serious expression, and Luna giggled as she threw breadcrumbs everywhere but at the birds. Ivory, now ancient by cat standards but still fiercely protective, supervised from her perch on a nearby bench. She'd grown even more mysterious over the years, sometimes appearing in places she couldn't possibly reach, always watching over the children with those knowing eyes. "Daddy, why do the birds like you better?" Luna asked Caius, tugging on his coat. He crouched to her level, that same gentle patience he'd learned to show Talia now extended to their children. "Because I've learned to be still, to let them come to me instead of trying to catch them." Dante, ever the serious one, nodded sagely. "Like how you got Mama." Caius laughed, the sound still surprising him sometimes. "Exactly like that, little king." Through the window, Talia smiled as she boxed up beignets for the afternoon rush. The Uber Eats tablet chimed constantly now, but they could afford to hire help. The dangerous men had stopped coming around after word spread about who her husband was. Some problems, she'd learned, really did solve themselves when you married the right monster. Her phone buzzed with a text from Caius. "The children want to know if monsters can have ice cream for lunch." She typed back, "Only if the monster promises to eat his vegetables at dinner." "Deal. I love you, Mrs. Thorne. Love you too, you dramatic vampire." As she watched her family through the glass, Talia touched the simple wedding ring on her finger. It wasn't the forced marriage that brought them together, but the choice they made every day to stay, to trust, to let love be stronger than fear. And in a city built on magic and mystery, where vampires walked among humans and white cats held ancient secrets, their love story became the kind of legend whispered in the French Quarter. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The monster had learned to love. The human had learned to trust, and their children would grow up knowing that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places. Even the pigeons seemed to approve. The lessons settled deep. Real love doesn't control or possess. It trusts, surrenders, and gives the other person power over your heart, knowing they might break it, but believing they won't. And sometimes the bravest thing the strongest person can do is fall to their knees and admit they were wrong. If you made it to the end of this story and felt every single moment, don't you dare scroll away without subscribing. I pour my soul into these vampire love stories, and your support is what keeps this community alive. Tell me in the comments what country or city you're watching this from tonight, because I genuinely want to know where this story found you tonight. And listen, if this one grabbed your heart, the next story is even more emotionally twisted, more devastating, more beautiful than this one. Click that video on your screen right now and let me wreck you all over again. You know you want to. I'll be waiting for you there.